Hello, all of you sovereign beings of light. This morning, I had an insight that I needed to talk to you about going biblical. So if you've been around the last couple of years in the awake and aware community, if you will, the last few years, you've probably been hearing this term going biblical. So I got the insight this morning to have a conversation with you about that. What does that mean? And so I'm going to be talking about some terms that I think will help to break that down for you a little bit. Now, if you're new to me and you haven't seen a lot of my shows and you haven't been following me for a few years, a little bit about me to let you know. I grew up in a polygamist, fundamentalist, doomsday cult in the mountains of Montana. And so I grew up with all of these end of the world prophecies and stories and theories and philosophies. And literally it was, fed to me every day of my life. And I used to have nightmares about the end of the world when I was a child. So these last couple of years, when all of this stuff started coming up and I see right in front of us the Ascension happening and biblical things happening right in front of me, I literally had a PTSD panic attack a couple of years ago. So I've had to work through all of this stuff from my childhood and learn how to understand these prophecies and terminologies from a spiritual perspective, rather than from the perspective of the religiosity that I grew up with, what I call man-made religions. So we got to remember that religions were made by men, and all of our history books, that's why they're called his story books, and the Bible and our ancient documents, they were all written by men, for men, about men. And that our religiosities were created by men because men seem to need to organize and construct things. So at the core of all of our religions are beautiful spiritual concepts and truths. However, they're also surrounded by lots of fear-based dogma, rules, and regulations that were created in man's interpretations and understanding of what spirituality is. And then also, they were created to keep humanity divided and conquered. So once we step outside of the boxes of belief, as I call them, and start to look at everything from pure love, from divine love, from a spiritual perspective, and let go of all of those fear-based beliefs that were created to keep us conquered and controlled, we can start to see what's happening in the world from a much more expanded perspective. And we can see how this end of the old world, as they call it, it's the end of the world, it's the end of the old world and the beginning of new earth. And it's the end of the fear-based world that we have been living in for thousands and thousands of years, that we're finally, humanity as a collective is outgrowing as we move into heaven on earth, peace on earth, new earth, love-based reality, fifth dimensional reality, 5D, fifth density. Pick the term that works for you. They basically all mean the same thing. So we're moving out of the end of the old world and the beginning of new earth. So I wanted to talk today about some of this terminology that I grew up with, and that's being thrown around now. Now, before I forget, I have a free book on my website called Rise Up, and it is my free gift. You can pick that up at victoriareynolds.com/free. And it goes into greater detail about some of the things I'm going to be mentioning here. There's actually a whole chapter that's dedicated just to terminology. And just to give you a fair warning, for some reason, the autoresponder link doesn't always work. So if you ask for the free gift and it doesn't give it to you, you can send me an email on my contact page and let me know what's going on, and I will personally email you a copy of that free book. I actually have another free book that's coming in the next couple of weeks, and that one's going to be a paid book, so I want to make sure you get it for free while you can. Okay, so I'm going to be going now and talking about this terminology, some of the things that were really on my mind this morning, and letting you know how I see these from a spiritual perspective rather than the hand-me-down beliefs of religious perspective. The first thing I want to talk about is false prophets. And so one of the things I grew up with is the idea that at the end of times, which is, the end of this particular dispensation, that there would be a lot of false prophets coming on the scene. And so the guidance I've gotten about this in the past couple of years, is that false prophets are what we call fake news. There's all the news media out there that's basically telling false stories about what's happening in the world. And the term that has been coined for that, as we all know, the last couple of years, is fake news. Another place where we can see this false prophets is what many people are calling the truther community. I call it the so-called truther community because there is also a lot of false prophets and deception within there as well. Another term I use for that are people who are pimping spirituality. So there are people who are out there giving dates and rates and quoting, what's going to happen in the world and blah, blah, blah. So the insight that came in with that this morning is that there are a lot of people out there who are using spirituality as a way of basically throwing out bait and reeling people in. And what they're prophesying, what they're saying is going to happen is quite simply not true. Now, they might actually believe that it's true because we all want this to happen sooner than later. We all want to be able to predict dates. And yet, one of the things my guidance has always shown me is that they don't give me dates, they don't give me rates, and that no one knows the mind of God. Nobody knows divine timing. And that what's happening in our world will happen in alignment with our collective resonance. So the more we hold in the vibration of love, the sooner the old world will unravel and our new world will be created. And so what's happening for a lot of people is they're throwing out these prophecies, if you will, and they're giving people false hope. And when these dates come and go, it then lowers the vibration and brings people back into hopelessness, which actually slows down the process of the very thing we want to create. And so it's really important to remember that no one is given exact dates because no one can predict the resonance of the loving that we each all have within our hearts is what creates this reality and moves it forward. So it's really important that we stay out of anger and againstness and fear and hopelessness and all of that. That keeps the old reality alive and stay focused on the loving. And the more we stay focused on the loving, the sooner this reality will begin to implode. That is the old reality. And the sooner this new reality will be constructed. It's all about us. So these prophecies that were talked about thousands of years ago about false prophets, and yes, it's all over the book of Matthew. I think it's Matthew that talks about the end of times and the false prophets. Again, it's the fake news, the false media, and people who are out there pimping spirituality, for lack of a better word, and may not be intentionally creating false prophecies, but they are still incorrect. And they are using spirituality as a way of drawing people in to their shows, to their websites, to their media. And so I really do my best to not give dates on anything because I'm not given specifics. And my team has made it very clear, my team, that is the angelic realm, the ascended masters, source, don't give me dates. There is one time a couple of months ago, I gave a date when I was on Charlie Ward's show, and I really needed to not do that because that was a date that was specific to me. And that date was specific to me, actually did in fact come true for me on that particular date. But I really, really, really try to stay out of predictions for anyone else other than to say what it is I see and what I know. And what I have been shown is that the light is in charge of everything. And that those who work on behalf of the dark side of the contrast, as I call it, are showing their hands. They're being allowed to show all their plays so that everybody can wake up and be aware of what's playing out so that the light does win. So just to let you know, that's what the false prophecies are that were talked about in the Bible. The next thing I want to talk about is one of the predictions in the Bible is that the sons and daughters would prophesy. And the reason I bring this up is because for thousands of years, it was only men who were allowed to prophesy. All the prophets of old were men. But what's happening in the world right now is more and more people are having their spiritual gifts activated, their ability, their psychic abilities, their spiritual abilities, their telepathic abilities now being activated, that both men and women have the ability to see, to be seers, if you will. So seeing is another word for prophesying, right? It's those who have the ability to envision the future, to see the future. And these seers are both men and women. And one of the things I find interesting is that it is now becoming more of the daughters than the sons, because when men tend to receive visions and revelations, it tends to have to go through their egoic perspectives, and with women just tend to have less ego to have to wrangle with. So the spirituality of the feminine tends to be a little bit clearer than that of the masculine. Although obviously that's just a generalization, because some of the men on the planet are very clear and very spiritually directed and don't think they have to go out and start a religion. That spirituality exists perfectly well outside of an organization. So that's one of the prophecies I wanted to share with you. Another one I find really interesting is the wars and rumors of wars. So we've been seeing, over the past few decades, more and more and more wars and more rumors of wars. So I don't know if you knew this, but since the inception of the United States has been involved with more than 100 wars. And I remember reading someplace just a couple of years ago that we were involved with 8 all at the same time. And we're actually presently involved with at least 3 that I know of, possibly 4. And of course, this doesn't include all of the domestic wars that we have here in the United States against the American people. That is, for example, the war on drugs, the present war on truth. So there's that. And then the rumors of wars are all these stories that the media is always conjuring up to keep humanity in fear, and always conjuring up to keep us looking in the direction they want us to go. So these aren't necessarily real wars, but they are wars that are rumors of wars, and even some of the chaos and division that the media is creating to keep us warring against each other. And quite honestly, a lot of times they're fake stories. We see that on the news. Like, a lot of the stuff that's shown on the media is, it's old news being projected as being new. So, for example, using photos from something that occurred 3 years ago that's completely unrelated to the war story they're presently telling. But most of humanity doesn't know that, because they believe everything that they see on these media outlets. Again, this is within the fake news, and also within the truth community, where there is a lot of false stuff going around there as well. So it's really, really, really important that anything you see and hear anywhere, no matter where it's coming from, that you tune into your own inner guidance, and you tune into your own resonance, and you do your own research to find out if a story is in fact true, or if it is pimping spirituality, or if it is misguiding humanity, or if it's, a fake meme. There's plenty of those out there. And so these wars and rumors of wars is being able to decipher, one, that there has been most definitely an increase of wars over the last 100 years, and increasing more and more throughout the last couple of decades. And the rumors of wars that were predicted, to recognize where there are just rumors of wars existing. Another thing that I grew up with was this, the earthquakes, the increase in storms, cataclysmic storms and earthquakes. Now, I don't know how much of these were taught elsewhere, but this is stuff that I grew up with, and that at the end of the world, there would be earthquakes and storms and hurricanes and tornadoes. And what's been really interesting the last couple of years is to see that there has, in fact, been an increase in atmospheric events, let's put it that way. And the earth is more active, more shakes and quakes, if you will. So this, of course, is being blamed on climate change. And in fact, climate change is real. For those people who are climate change denials, you might want to pull your head out of the sand and take a look, because the climate has, in fact, changed a lot the last, I want to say 30 years. I've seen it right here in my own community. What isn't being talked about is the reason for that. The reason for the Earth being more active. And the reason for climate change is actually climate manipulation. And so that's something to really be aware of, that the planet herself, because of the manipulation to the planet, that's the reason we're seeing these climate experiences, if you will. And one thing I do know is that all of those technologies have now been taken over by the light and will be repurposed to clean up the environment rather than destroy it. So it's important that we stay focused on the truth that the light really is in control of all this, even when it doesn't look like it is. So that's one of the prophecies that I grew up with, and feels very real, and it's really kind of scary, but at the same time, very revealing. And I've worked through my PTSD panic attacks, but at first I got to tell you, a couple of years ago, it really freaked me out. So another one of the prophecies I grew up with is the tearing of the veil. And I don't know if this was just my particular religion or if there's other religions that believe in this veil. But what I was shown about, well, actually it was in November of 2011 when I first began telepathically communicating with higher beings, if you will. I was shown that the veil is actually a veil of deception that holds humanity underneath this veil, and that once we pierce the veil, we're able to see all of what's going on in the world. And this veil separated the third dimension from higher dimensions. And dimensions are dimensions of consciousness, not other dimensions of being. So this veil separates these dimensions of consciousness. And once we pierce that veil, we're able to look at what's really going on in the world. And so what started to happen a few years ago, well, in 2012, the third dimension and the fourth dimension converged, and the veil began to be torn and shredded. So more and more and more people could now see through the veil and pierce the veil and begin to see that this is actually what's called the Great Awakening. It's the great piercing, the great shredding of the veil. And one of the visuals I got about a year ago is not only is the veil being shredded, it's like I'm seeing like it going through a shredder. It's actually being burned so that it can never be used again, so that humanity can never be put back to sleep and can never be blindly guided, like blind faith, right? So that's what the veil is, the tearing of the veil. I know that the story of when Yeshua died, that there was a tearing of the veil in the temple of Solomon that separated the rest of the temple from the Holy of Holies. And that's kind of what's been happening here on the planet now, is that the veil is being torn away, and we are going to all be able to experience the Holy of Holies, which is this new loving earth that is being made manifest through every single one of us. Another thing that came in for me this morning, and I hear this every once in a while, and that is the thief in the night. So someone asked me this morning about the global currency reset, the global financial reset. Now, it's really important to understand that is not the same thing as the Great Reset that the dark side of the contrast is talking about. The dark side tends to use terminology that's almost identical to the terminology the light uses, and they do that to keep people confused and not being able to see the difference. So the financial reset is actually about restoring prosperity to all of humanity and giving back to the people what was taken from them. And that this is about the redemption, prosperity redemption. So what's come in for me several times is that it will come like a thief in the night. This redemption will come like a thief in the night. And no one knows the time or the date or the place or the rate. And it will be done in secret. So for people who think there's going to be a rush on redemption centers and a rush on the bank, that's more than likely not how it's going to happen. It's going to happen very quietly behind the scenes while the rest of the world is caught up in whatever's going on. Actually, what I was shown about 10 years ago is that it would happen during martial law. So if you see martial law happening, know that the prosperity programs are not far behind. It's going to be a really, really close experience, because on one perspective, it's going to look like everything is falling apart. But on the other perspective, it means that everything is coming together. So it's important that you keep your focus on the redemption of humanity. And no one knows when that will be, because nobody knows the mind of God. Nobody knows divine timing. And again, as I was saying earlier, it has a lot to do with our own resonance. It will occur in alignment with enough of us being ready for it, because this new prosperity that's coming forward is being coded at a fifth dimensional frequency, so that it stays out of the hands of those who are lower vibration, and only is given into the hands of those who can use it on behalf of all of humanity. And then it will spread forth in these distribution ways that it affects all life on earth. But the vast amount of that redemption is going to go to people who have proven themselves at a high enough vibration to be able to lead the rest with that prosperity. So there's that, the thief in the night. And the other thing I was shown with that is to remember to stay awake, because it does come in the night, and to keep your candles lit. So one of the visuals I was getting with that is the prophecy of the 7 virgins with their oil lamps and keeping their lamps full. This is about keeping your light lit, keeping yourself enlightened, and staying up in vibration so that you don't miss it when it comes. This next thing I want to talk about is the ascension. So this is kind of an overall term, but a lot of people think the only ones who are going to ascend are those who are God-fearing Christians. Well, the truth is the ascension isn't about that at all. Nobody is being lifted up and taken someplace else. This is about the vibration of humanity being lifted up. This is about restoring the light within the heart light. It's about remembering the loving essence of who we are, and it's about restoring the Christ consciousness of unconditional love within ourselves. The ascension is actually about us raising our resonance, our vibration, our loving being, and remembering the divine beings that we are. And as we lift ourselves up in the loving, in the light of living love, we ascend into higher and higher vibrations of loving until we actually bring heaven to earth. So it used to be that we would have to die and cross a 4th dimensional bridge in order to get into heaven. But what's happened since 2012, and this is really what 2012 is all about, is that the 4th dimension converged with the 3rd dimension. Again, these are dimensions of consciousness, made it possible for humanity to move up that 4th dimensional bridge, or what I call a spiritual spiral, into this 5th dimensional love-based heaven on earth reality. So we are all in the ascension process, and the ascension actually began in the early 1960s, and we are now seeing, with a small number of people, that's what the hippie movement was all about, and has been growing exponentially. What I understand is by 3% a year since then, so that now there are so many people who are awake and aware and spiritually uplifted and spiritually in that loving and connecting and leaving the boxes of fear-based beliefs behind, that we as a collective of humanity are ascending. And so many of us now that it's impossible for the mass ascension to not occur. So stay in that loving and stay in that light, and know that we are all part of that ascension process. It's here and it's now, and we're not going back. The resurrection. So that's another one I grew up with. So when I was a kid, I imagined all of these zombies coming up out of the ground, which is funny because now we're talking about the zombie apocalypse. And all these dead bodies coming up out of the ground would be a zombie apocalypse. So you can look at it that way. But my understanding is that this is not about a zombie apocalypse. This is about resurrecting the divine feminine. So the divine feminine thousands of years ago was placed beneath the masculine and blamed for all of humanity's issues. And she basically was completely ignored. You have most of the people on the planet who only recognize the divine masculine. They only know Father God. But all creation is both masculine and feminine. So what's been happening since about 2010 is that we've been resurrecting the divine feminine, and people are beginning to understand the role that she plays as God, and that the father aspect of God is that infinite intelligence, and the mother aspect of God is the infinite wisdom. The father aspect of God is the planning and the construction and the modeling and the strategizing, and the mother aspect of God is the nurturing and the compassion and that love, that unconditional love of the mother. And she is being resurrected to be placed on the mantle next to the Divine Father, not one above another, but in perfect unity and perfect harmony. And that this union is now being made manifest in all life on earth, recognizing the value of both the masculine and the feminine in all things. And it's also about resurrecting and restoring humanity to its fullest potential. So the divine human blueprint was downgraded thousands of years ago, and we forgot who we are and what we're really capable of. So what's happening in this resurrection is that our divine human blueprint is being resurrected and restored. The planet herself is being resurrected and restored. And what happens through this resurrection and restoration is that we'll be able to do miracles. That's what Yeshua meant when he said that you too can create miracles the way that he did. And that is within every single one of us once we resurrect it within ourselves. And it's also about resurrecting and restoring the Christ consciousness of unconditional love that all of us have been sparked with. We just need to remember to find it within ourselves and resurrect it within ourselves. Another word I want to end with is apocalypse. So a lot of people have this belief that apocalypse means it's chaos and the end of the world and everything is going to fall apart. The word apocalypse means the great revealing of all things once hidden. So we are in the apocalypse right now as more truths are coming to the surface, as secrets are pulled out of, skeletons and secrets pulled out from the closets and out from under rugs and pulled out of the cupboards, as I call it, right? We're cleaning the cupboards of Mother Earth. That is the apocalypse. It isn't about the whole world falling apart. It's about the old reality falling apart and all of these fake stories and all of the corruption being brought to the surface for us to look at, to transmute, and choose to never repeat those stories again. So, they say that you keep making the same mistake over and over again until we finally learn the lesson. As all of this old stuff is brought to the surface and all of these old stories of corruption are revealed, we will choose to learn from the lessons and not repeat them again. So that's really what the apocalypse is. And this last thing I want to talk about is the separation of the wheat from the chaff. And this is something that I think a lot of you are beginning to recognize. And this really is about the disclosure of the dark side, of the contrast, if you will, showing how there are some beings on this planet that are not beneficial to humanity. And so as we move into this new reality and we begin separating the wheat from the chaff, only those who are loving, my understanding is if you're at least 50% loving, you'll be perfectly fine. You're invited to this new reality. And this would be what's considered the wheat. Those who are loving, those who are in integrity with their words. So it's going back to being impeccable with our words and that we do what we say we're going to do. We use only loving words. We hold back any resentment and judgment toward anyone else. And if we have those, we look within ourselves to see what it is within us that's being projected outward that needs to be healed within ourselves. So that's the wheat. The chaff are those beings that are not of service to humanity, that are not of loving resonance. And those are being disinvited from the human game. So this is what's starting to happen right now, is we're beginning to see that separation of what I saw a couple of years ago as separation of worlds, the two worlds split, the two earth split, some people call the bifurcation of worlds, where these two identical earth experiences are currently coexisting. And the more we move into loving resonance, the more those two realities will split. And those who cannot lift themselves up to light speed, this is what I was shown a couple of years ago, will go elsewhere and continue playing out that Earth as a learning planet, where we, those of us who are loving and who are here as a beneficial presence on the planet, will continue in this higher vibrational experience of Earth, where Earth is no longer a learning planet, but rather it is about returning to the garden of Gaia, as I call it, and we will be experiencing a planet that is paradise rather than a planet that is an education center. That is my message for today. I hope that it helps you find more peace in this process that we're currently in, and what others are calling the storm, because this is really about the old reality. The old world is coming to an end, and it is collapsing. A new earth is being created, and it's being created through every single one of us. As always, remember to hold your light so high others can't help but see their own light. Together we are creating a world of peace, love, harmony, prosperity, freedom for all life on earth. And as always, get bold, be fearless, and live free.